The Atlanta real estate market is cold. Homes are sitting on the market, interest rates remain high, and there is a lot of economic uncertainty. So, is it a good time to sell your home in Atlanta? Is it a good time to purchase a home? And is it a good idea to rent instead of buying? We are going to tackle the big questions that people in the housing market are currently tackling. We'll review the real estate market statistics, and we'll end with some guidance on how you can approach these questions and make the best decision for you and your family. But first, let's take a look at what the statistics are showing us. All right, I have the statistics pulled up in front of me straight from my local MLS. This really is the entire metro Atlanta area, and it's covering all property types at all price ranges. So looking at the data here, we'll start with closed sales. So this is rolling back the last 3 years in July, because this data will always be a month behind. But as you can see, there were 20% less closings, less homes sold in July of this year than of July of last year. And you can also see July of last year was an increase of 8.5% over 2023. This is a drastic turn in the opposite direction. If we look at pending sales, we see that those are down 20% over this time last year. So it looks like August is also due to have a significant drop over August of last year. Very interesting, if we look at the homes for sale, this is a great indicator for those looking to purchase a home. There are 34% more homes available to buy than this time last year. And as you can see, this time last year, you had way more homes available to you than in July of 2023. And you can only imagine what July of 2021 looked like. I can tell you from experience, your options were extremely limited. So one of the positive things that hopefully some of you will take away from this video is that if you are in the market to buy, you should have a lot more options to choose from. Similarly, if you look at months supply, you can see that we have 37% more supply than this time last year. As you can see, there is 5.1 months of rolling supply, meaning that is the time it would take to sell all the current listings that are active without adding any new ones. It would take about 5 months. And in real estate, a balanced market, balanced between a seller's market and buyer's market, is about 6 months. And earlier in the decade, you can see this was much less, 2.3% in 2023, and we were down to about a month's supply of inventory in 2021 and 2022, meaning homes were selling immediately. It would only take 1 month at that time to sell everything that was currently listed. And of course, 1 month is about the quickest amount of time that you can sell a home, 30 days on average. So there is certainly more supply than we've been used to in quite some time. Now here's where it gets tricky. If we look at the sales price, you can see it has not gone down in one sense. It is still 0.2% higher than this time last year. However, it is down in the sense that it is not nearly tracking with the average appreciation that we have seen over the last 6, 7, 8 years. We were having some insane increases in the value of the home over the last few years, especially when interest rates were at rock bottom. So prices are dropping in the sense that they are not increasing as much as they typically do year over year. But the major problem, of course, is that huge spike, that huge, incredible hot sellers market that really at its core was a massive amount of demand with very, very limited supply, compounded by extremely low interest rates, caused the prices to absolutely skyrocket, and they've essentially stayed at their peak. So we have a situation now where you are potentially looking at paying a price for a home that is the accumulation of a scorching hot seller's market over the last few years, but we are not currently in that market. There is always a massive lag with sellers adjusting to the new market. And if everything continues to trend in this way, where supply continues to increase, interest rates remain the same, I do think we will actually see prices come down year over year at some point, which, depending on how you look at it, is honestly not a bad thing. Now, if we look at days on market, again, this has increased dramatically, not over last year, but 100-fold over 2023, where it was 11 days. However, the average is still, or the median rather, is still 26 days on market, which, although it is not what we're used to, is simply more balanced. One of the things I hope you take away from this video is that these are extreme shifts in a different direction. However, we were in such an extreme place, we are actually moving towards a more middle ground, even if it feels extreme in a different way. So in spite of what we've looked at so far, there is still a lot of demand for homes in the greater Atlanta area. So if you're a seller out there and you've got a good quote unquote product, and you price it appropriately and have a great realtor market it appropriately, your home is still going to sell rather quickly. And lastly, we'll look at percent of original price when it's sold. So you can see that sellers are getting about 97.4% of what they originally listed for. So yes, we are seeing significant price reductions, especially compared to the last few years. You can see 2023, the median was 100%. And I'm sure if you went back, it could be above that. Things were at median or on average selling for more than they were listed for. So we are, of course, seeing sellers in 2025 have to do some price reductions if they do want to sell. So let's go over the main questions you might be asking yourself. Number one, should I wait to sell my home? Now, it's really important to remember that there are a lot of factors contributing to all of these questions. So no answer is going to be the same across the board. It's going to be highly individualistic to your life circumstance. Now, if you have no selling related pressures, if you don't immediately need the money, or if you're not being relocated to work, or if you don't need a bigger space because your family is growing, if you are comfortable where you are and you'd have no problem staying in your current place for the next 3 to 5 years, then you may have some legitimate incentive to wait and see what happens in the short term in the real estate market. Now, it's important to remember, if you do decide to go sell, and if you don't end up getting that home run price that you were hoping to get, that people for the last few years have been telling you would get, you're still probably getting a pretty fantastic price. I mean, we are still at the peak of the mountain in many ways, so to speak. If you purchased your home 4 or more years ago, you're probably set to make a very significant profit on that investment. So even if you're not selling at the absolute tippy top of that chart where it peaks, you may be selling just a little bit on the downward slope, but you're still way high up in relation to what you were looking at when you purchased the home. And so if you do have life pressures encouraging you to sell, I think that's important to keep in mind. Depending on when you purchase your home, you're still set to make a significant profit. You had a great home to live in for X amount of years, and you're potentially walking into an advantageous buying situation. So as I say quite often on this channel, when talking about many different aspects of real estate, prioritize your life situation. If there's some life pressure that is pushing you to sell, don't get in your head about how the market is, or how you're not going to get that much money, or that if you wait 6 months, you'll get thousands and thousands more dollars. Time equals money, and honestly, stress equals money in a lot of different ways. So just be prepared to listen to your realtor, list your home for a price that's appropriate to the market conditions that we're seeing, and take solace in the fact that it could get much worse for sellers depending on what happens in the future. Number two, is it a good time to buy? So as we already saw, in some ways, yes, it's absolutely a good time to buy, purely in terms of the amount of options that you have available to you, which gives you an opportunity to have a nicer home. When you have 1 month's supply, you are really, picking over the leftovers, or you are fighting tooth and nail for the gem of the bunch. So this is a scenario where not only will you have more options, but you should have a much more relaxed process in buying. You're less likely to be competing against other buyers. You're gonna have more leverage in these transactions to get sellers to fix a part of the home, or contribute to your closing costs, or to reduce the price. However, I think it's important to have a mindset that it's a little bit riskier to purchase a home in the current environment than it has been in the last few years, from a lot of different perspectives. Mainly the economy. It's not hard to imagine currently having a major economic downturn where, depending on what industry you're in, you could lose your job. I think it's really important to think about these things, even though it can be uncomfortable. For example, if you scored a once-in-a-lifetime job, or for some reason you are at a much higher salary than is typical for your job, or you don't have the education, background, or experience to get a similar paying job should you quit or be fired, then I think you should take caution, at least with the price of the home that you look to purchase. This is definitely not an economic situation or real estate market where I would purchase at the absolute top of my budget. Another consideration is that because homes are not appreciating like they have earlier in the decade, if you're uncertain of your future plans, meaning you might move in the next few years, it could be pretty risky to purchase something. Earlier in the decade, you really only had to hold on to your home for a year or more before you could expect to break even or make a profit. And some people were selling their homes 2 years after they purchased it for a significant profit. And that just does not look to be the case currently. So if your life situation has you moving to place for whatever reason in short order, then I think it's important to consider the potential loss that you would experience in having to sell so soon after purchasing. However, if you have to be here and you know you're going to be here for a while, and you want to buy because you believe in owning real estate and all the tax benefits and appreciation benefits that go along with that, and you feel secure in your job, or you feel like you're potentially purchasing something that is well within your budget at your current salary, or a salary you could easily duplicate if you lost that job, then I would say go for it. Prices are very likely to drop significantly over the next year or two, so you're not going to miss out on a major price drop. You're going to have way more options to choose from, a way less stressful market environment. And if you purchase at current rates, if the rate were to go down significantly for some reason, the value of your home stands to go way up. You could also refinance at that new rate and be even more well within your budget. And lastly, should I rent or buy a home? If you're on the fence, you could maybe afford to do both, but you don't know how long you're going to be here. There are a lot of factors to consider with renting versus buying, but there's no denying that right now the gap between the two has never been larger. If you're earlier on in your life, or if for whatever reason your main concern is cost of living, renting is currently blowing buying out of the water. Okay, it is just flat out much cheaper to rent a home in the Atlanta area than it is to purchase one. And it wasn't too long ago where the gap between these two was much closer. In fact, when interest rates were in the high 2s, there was a time where it didn't make a whole lot of sense to rent because your mortgage was going to be the same or less than that rent. However, now we're in the opposite situation. The rental market has cooled as well, meaning there are more rental options, and this is stagnating the rental prices and having them come down, similar to the buying market. So if you were a renter, you're gonna have more options, you're gonna have more leverage in these transactions, you're gonna be able to live in something much more cheaply than you would if you purchased that same property. But at the end of the day, this is a financial investment decision, okay? I always encourage my clients to look at purchasing real estate as an investment property, even if it's a personal residence, because at the end of the day, you're taking a large chunk of money and spending it somewhere. And so I would absolutely involve your financial advisor or whomever you sort of take advice from to chart your financial direction when you're considering these decisions. Is your current goal to keep the cost of living as low as possible and save money? Or are you in a situation where you have an extremely stable income and you're able to purchase something with a mortgage that's well within your budget, and you have a chunk of change that you want to store in real estate, which would be the home you're purchasing, which, by the way, is a hedge against inflation. So if you think inflation is going to continue to increase, then in purely financial terms, it could be a good place to store your money, depending of course on a lot of factors, especially which neighborhood it's in and what's going on in that area. But remember, buying does create wealth. I saw a statistic the other day that 1 in 10 millennials are asset millionaires. And of course, the major reason for that is they purchased a piece of real estate that went massively up in value. And although things have slowed way down from the hysteria that we've seen over the last few years, real estate historically trends upward. So if we're taking a long view, then I think it is a safe bet. At the end of the day, this is all about what you think is going to happen in the economy and what you think is going to happen in your personal life situation and finding the best balance in navigating between the two. Now, if you're curious what my personal opinion about what may happen would be, I would say that the current administration's economic policy is inflaming inflation. And really the only thing stemming the tide is the Fed's current policy of holding rates where they are. If the Fed chairman was fired and someone was put in his place who would agree to lower the rate, of course you would see a flurry of activity in the short term with a red hot real estate market, right up until the point where the stock market crumbles under the weight of inflation, causing a massive reduction in employment and a major long-term setback in the American economy. Or the current chairman stays in place, they continue their policy of an aggressive fight against inflation, the American economy once again proves to be incredibly resilient, and we make it through to a new administration which has less extreme policies, allowing the economy to rebound and even out, in which case things don't end up changing all that month, at least in regards to the real estate market. But at the end of the day, all of this and everything you hear in whatever media you consume, of course, is conjecture. The important thing to remember is that everyone needs shelter, including you. You need shelter, you need a way to pay for that shelter. And so rather than looking into a crystal ball and trying to predict the future, I would look at your own financial situation, your job stability, your income, and what portion of your income is represented by the cost of housing for you and your family. The lower percentage housing represents in your overall expenses, the safer or less risky of a financial position that you're in. But of course, it's also important to account for opportunity cost. And overall, real estate is one of the safest asset classes you could be invested in because everyone needs shelter. So I hope that cleared some things up for you. Hope it provided value. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Comment below what content you want to see in the future, and I'll see you next time.